What's up, folks? This is Justin Garcia, a.k.a. Master Chim, and I am here on the line, very fortunate to have, from the Order of Man, Mr. Ryan Michler. Ryan, why don't you say what's up to the Pressure Project listeners?
What's going on, guys? Glad to be here for sure.
So I got to tell you, I'm very happy to have you on. I've been following your content for a while, and I will very arrogantly say I don't follow a lot of people's content because a lot of it is bullshit, a lot of it is fluff, a lot of it is weak sophistry nonsense and a waste of everybody's time. But you got some solid shit out there, and I reached out to you, and I'm glad we made this happen. So,
yeah, for sure, man. Looking forward to it. I'm honored. I'm honored that you at least to some level know what we're all about. So that's good.
Roger that. Absolutely. So you have been on a quest with the Order of Man that started some time ago, and you've made a lot of progress, a lot of sort of stages that, you know, I've seen podcasts come and go. I've seen projects come and go, you know, and to me, and you may have noticed this yourself, the thing that allows people that sort of staying power is the authenticity, the realism, the fact that they actually give a fuck.
Yeah.
And they're not just sort of recycled, you know, internet marketers or recycled copywriters that couldn't fucking sell a book properly, and the $47 Kindle program didn't work out, so they're like, oh, you know what? Let me start a fucking podcast.
Right.
We see them come and go, but you had a problem that you saw, and it had to do with the world of men. Do me a favor, tell me and my listeners about exactly what became the impetus for the Order of Men.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to go back, and I won't get into all the details, but if we were to go back to the very beginning, it was when I was 3 years old. I had my father leave, so it was basically for most of my young life, it was me and my sister and my mom. I had a couple of stepfathers come into my life who just weren't great examples of what it meant to be a man. Fortunately, my mom always had the insight to involve me in sports, get me involved in sports, so I could be around other men. But again, I just didn't really know and understand what it took to be a good husband, what it took to be a good father, business owner, community leader, all the things that you talk about as well. And I really went on this quest. I went on this journey to figure this out for myself. And part of the reason I did that is because my wife and I went through a separation. I want to say it was let's see, it was almost 9 years ago. And it was a hard time, man. It was a dark time in my life. And fortunately, we salvaged our marriage through a lot of work on my part, a lot of work on her part, but it was a recognition that I had more to do with the failure and collapse of our marriage than I had initially given myself credit for. And started to surround myself with great people, started to read great books, started to listen to CDs. Podcasting was in its infancy during that time. And really started to get my head right and get my body right, my money right, and get all this stuff figured out. And the more I talked about it and let guys know about my experience, and the more that I opened up and shared with other people, I recognized that there was a bunch of men who had dealt with the same thing. No father, marital issues, don't know how to be a good dad, struggling with their anger, struggling with their emotions, all of this stuff. And I realized, man, this is something we can start. And I started with selfish reasons. I started to have opportunities to talk with guys like yourself, where I had this platform that I could have these conversations, but it's grown in what it has because of the need in society for men to step up as leaders and shine as an example so that other guys can figure out how to do this for themselves. So that's where we're at, man.
Right on, man. It's a hell of a story, a very familiar one. And I got to say, you know, being somebody who's walked this walk for a while now, it's not always easy. And I'm sure you know that. It's a lot of times, especially in our society today, it's much easier to be the guy that just wilts, you know, when the pressure shows up, to bail when the relationships get tough. And that's a hell of a story. And I like the framing of how you've managed to salvage your marriage, because first and foremost, it acknowledges that marriages are worth salvaging in the first
Absolutely. Place. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and these days when so many people, so many men in particular, want to sort of measure their masculinity based on how many relationships they have, as opposed to the depth of one relationship they're able to, you know, to construct, it's definitely a breath of fresh air to hear that. So you started the Order of Man, and when I started the Pressure Project, it was to vent, it was to complain, it was to start, you know, having these sort of just drill sergeant sessions with men, basically yelling about how we're all fucking it up. You started the Order of Man, like you said, for selfish reasons, to connect. How did that grow? And where are you today with the Order of Man?
Yeah, I mean, for me, here's the deal, and here's the conclusion that I've came to is that I always had the answers, and I'm still figuring this out along the way. But my answers to my own problems and my own questions are buried within me already. So it's my job to uncover those things. It's uncovered through the refiner's fire of pressure and through hardship and heartache and challenges and struggle and fighting and clawing and scraping your way through life the best that you can. And so I put myself in positions that are difficult mentally, physically, emotionally, so that I can become stronger. And what I've recognized is that there's other men, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of men, billions of men across the planet who are struggling in some of the very same ways. And I don't need to have all the answers. I don't need to figure it all out. I don't need to tell them what to do. What I found is more effective is me helping them uncover the solutions to their own problems, because it is within them. So I've really delved into this world of being a great question asker, because I think the more powerful questions that we can ask of ourselves and the more powerful questions we can ask of others gives them the capability of discovering their own answers. And so I look at myself as a coach, and I look at myself as a catalyst for growth in men's life, not because I'm telling people what to do, but because I'm articulating or helping them figure out how to do it for themselves and how to figure out things on their own. I really want to render myself obsolete. I don't want to be in these guys' life forever. I want to be a stepping stone to greater things where they feel like, hey, I can do some of this stuff on my own, or I can manage this thing completely.
Right on, right on. I in the Pressure Project, and my guys know when I talk about what a leader, I always say, is a compass, not a direction. It's
Sure.
not about following me. It's about, let me show you what we agree is the mission. And let me remind you where that direction is, but ultimately you and that destination is a relationship that I have nothing to do with. So
yeah, that's a great point. I like that perspective a lot, and I agree with it for sure.
100%. So I know I've been running a podcast for a few years now. I've dealt with all sorts of obstacles and hurdles, and it's been with the haters. It's been with self-doubt at times. It's been the technology. It's been, what are some of the things, from the time you started the Order of Man, as you've grown into a very successful model today, what are some of the hurdles that you managed to overcome?
The biggest thing that I think all of us fall prey to is imposter syndrome. Like when I started, and the imposter syndrome, for those that are listening who may not really quite understand what that is, it's the belief that you don't belong, or you don't deserve the success that you have, or you're not qualified to share advice, or whatever, anything along those lines. And so for me, when I started, it was hard, because I'm like, who am I to give advice to other men about how to be better men when I'm trying to figure this out on my own? And I still fall into that some days. And I get praise and accolades, and I get the haters and stuff too. But the messages that I get that are overwhelmingly positive, that say, hey, Ryan, you've changed my life, or you've helped me do this, you helped me do that. I'm like, I don't know if I have, and so it's kind of weird to get that praise when I'm just a regular guy trying to figure all this stuff out too. I get angry with my kids. I fight with my wife. I lose money. I make dumb decisions. I'm quick to anger. I mean, all the things that every guy would deal with. And yet here I am trying to tell you how to do it. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon. So the angle that I took and the approach that I took, and I think this falls into your understanding or your articulation of leadership, is that, hey guys, look, I'm not the expert. I'm a man among men. I'm trying to figure out with you guys how to get this figured out. I've learned some things along the way. I'm going to share that information with you. I hope you're going to share that with me. I see your shirt. I don't know what it says under it, but it says tribe. Tribe matters. And that illustrates the point perfectly. It's about a brotherhood. It's about a society. It's about, Justin, you know some stuff. I know some stuff. This guy knows some stuff. That guy knows some stuff. And collectively, we can figure this out together. We don't have to go at it alone, which is what society would have men believe, is that you individually have to have it figured out. And if you don't, you're less of a man because you don't.
Right. I agree. I agree completely. I talk a lot about the synergy of tribe. The fact that it's not about, fulfilling all of life's, the roles as an individual. It's really finding that team that allows you to create the sum that equals more than, the total of its parts.
Yes.
Fuck, that's
However, yeah. No, I know you're going with that.
And, a lot of people these days don't see, the fact that having to be a part of a team requires a little bit of work. And It's not about, just being who you are and finding people who don't want to pressure you, who don't want to change. It's about finding people that are going to reflect to you those things that you have to change, those things that maybe you have to sort of adjust and build upon to be able to contribute to the tribe at large.
Right. And it also, if I can, it also requires a sense of humility, right? And that's not something that's genuinely considered masculine. But my viewpoint on humility is that humility is strength. Like if I approach a situation in real time with what's really going on, and I operate in the reality of I have these things figured out, but I don't quite have these things figured out, that allows me to be humble, which in turn allows me to see the blind spots that the prideful guy can't see. And so he's walking around with his inflated ego and his puffed out chest. And all the while he's got all these little blind spots he can't even recognize. And it's just a matter of time before he falls flat on his face. So being humble and recognizing, man, I don't have this all figured out. You don't have this all figured out. Here's where I struggle. And being real with yourself about where you're not great allows you to fill the gap yourself and get stronger in that area, or bring the people in, the tribe in that can help you specifically in those weaknesses, in those shortcomings.
I agree completely. And humility and vulnerability is something that's looked upon these days as weakness. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't know what the mission is nowadays. We've become sort of confused as to what a good man is, what a productive man is, and how those two things are really overlapping, definitions. There was one point where in order to be a man and be looked at as a successful man, you had to be able to protect your family. You had to be able to provide for your family. You had to be able to sort of find the solutions to the problems of everyday life.
Yeah.
And with that, if we do not have that sort of humility and vulnerability to open ourselves up to answers that people are willing to give us, then it's really no mystery why so many men, as you say, fall flat nowadays. Trying to strengthen themselves.
And they feel it too, right? Like I know you've talked with countless men, and I've talked with countless men who are wandering around aimlessly, and there's like some big void missing in their life, and they feel it, and they're like, what is missing in my life? And they can't quite put their finger on it. And the reality is that they're weak mentally, physically, emotionally, so they can't protect. They can't go out there and provide not only financially in the financial provision, but the mental and the intellectual and the spiritual provision that men are supposed to provide. And to your point about leadership earlier, they can't preside. They can't lead their families in strength and courage and all of the things that we know makes a great leader. And so they're wandering around aimlessly, wondering what it is and knowing that they're not quite living what it means to be a man, and they just can't put their finger on it. And the point that I think you and I are both making is that the more men can fulfill those roles that we consider masculine, protect, provide, and preside, which is leadership, synonymous with leadership, the more masculine we feel, the more confidence we grow, the more capable we become of serving our families and our communities and ourselves, frankly, as well. And that's the missing piece. That's the missing component.
Right. Absolutely. I think that there is a very organic design to who we are as men. And I think that in today's society, it's very easy to get distracted to what it is that we know to be true internally. An analogy I use a lot is the aquarium of society. And a fish could be any fish he wants to be if he's in an aquarium.
Sure.
When he's thrust into the ocean, he's really forced to play to his strengths, to avoid his weaknesses, and find people that are going to help, create that synergy for survival. With that in mind, with the Order of Man, or with your mission, Ryan Michler's mission in general, what do you hope to accomplish? What is the goal? What is the true north of what it is that you do?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I want to help millions of men across the planet step more fully into their roles as husbands, fathers, and leaders. And that's leaders in their communities, leaders in their businesses. And so what that requires is what I refer to as masculine sovereignty. And when I talk about sovereignty, what I'm talking about is the complete and absolute ownership of your own decisions, your own choices, your own consequences in your life. And what I see more and more in society, and this is not just with men, but this is also with women, is that we are trying to shift any level of responsibility. We got guys that are 30, 35, 40 years old that are still living in their parents' basement, right? Playing video games, living off mom and dad's paycheck. That's not manliness. That's not masculinity. That doesn't fulfill any of the roles that we talk about. We have these types of things happening. We have guys that are going to school and college forever, right? Like for 10 years, but they're not walking out with a doctorate or a doctor type program. They're walking out with just some random knowledge about fine arts and all of these other random subjects that are not going to serve them or anybody else very well at all.
Mm.
And so we're seeing these guys who won't launch, right? And because they never have to pay those student loans back that they're acquiring, it's like, cool, I can just do this forever and live in perpetual adolescence.
Right.
And those type of things are a huge, huge problem. But the more that men and women, frankly, take on the role of responsibility and accountability and ownership, and everything that I do in my life is a result of my choices and my behavior and my beliefs. It's definitely not the easy route, but it's the route that we were designed to follow. We were designed as men and women to follow and be accountable and responsible for ourselves, and men specifically accountable and responsible for those that we signed, like our wives and our kids and our community and our neighbors and our employees. And we said, hey, I will protect you. I will provide for you. I will lead you. And yet we're not seeing men do that in society today. It's too bad. And there's a lot of symptoms that come from that.
Well stated. And I love that idea of sovereignty, of complete ownership of and accountability of one's decisions. Right on. So we're going to get to a couple of questions that I try to ask every guest because I want some continuity in the feedback for my listeners.
Sure.
The first of which is, where in your life has tribe helped you in a situation where probably being by yourself, you wouldn't have made it?
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about this. One instance in particular is, as I started in the financial planning industry, and that's my background, I floundered, man. Like I walked into the industry with a puffed up chest because I had been fairly successful in anything else that I had done up to that point. And I walked in there and, my head held high and I'm like, man, I got this. I'm going to crush this. And I absolutely got slaughtered for the first couple of years, barely making ends meet. I remember pacing around my backyard, wondering how I was going to make the mortgage payment. And I woke up, I'm like, man, just like, you got to figure this out. You either got to quit, which I'm not a quitter and I didn't want to do that, or you've got to figure this out. And so I dropped the ego. I dropped the arrogance and the pride. And I reached out to advisors within my industry who were crushing it, who were excelling, who were succeeding constantly every single week, every single year. These guys were just absolutely dominating the industry. And it was a simple matter of saying, hey, can I take you to lunch? And can I talk with you? And can I ask you some questions? And the more I did this and the more that I included them and the more that we worked together on cases and the more that I learned from them through this tribe that I had deliberately gone out and created, the better things got. I was able to serve my clients. I was able to grow my income. I was able to start my own financial planning practice, which now has morphed into the time and the freedom and the flexibility to start Order of Man, all because I was willing to take that first step, which is, will you, who knows more than me, will you help me with what I struggle with?
Right on. Next, 2 books every man should read. 2 books.
Two books. All right. I've got
only 2.
Only 2. I know that's the thing. What am I going to isolate it to? Because I've got a whole library over here. The first one I'd say is As a Man Thinketh. Have you read that book?
I have.
I'm sure that's the case. James Allen wrote it. I don't even know when he wrote it, but it's timeless. And the more that we get our mind right, the better we're going to be and the better our actions and behaviors and beliefs and consequences of those choices. So As a Man Thinketh is number 1. And then maybe to tie into the conversation I had earlier about masculine sovereignty and complete ownership, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, 2 Navy SEALs. Just a powerful illustration of what it means to take complete ownership of your life. It's written from the perspective of business and being a business leader, but the lessons apply as a family man, as a community leader. Maybe you have some spiritual callings or obligations. Maybe you're a coach of a team like I am with my 2 sons' baseball teams. It permeates across every element of life. So those are the 2 books I'd give you today.
That is awesome. I've had Jocko's book in my queue for some time now. And with me, and I don't know how you ingest books nowadays, but I'm a big audiobook guy.
Are you? Yeah.
I own a martial arts school in the Bronx, and I live out in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. So I have about an hour and a half commute, and that's where I bang out the audiobooks. But I got to move that up to the front of the queue.
Yeah.
I believe Jocko and I have some friends in common. I've been fortunate enough to be able to train with some of the military, and everybody has great things to say about him.
Yeah.
And his content is always incredible. And it's a testament here again that his book is solid.
Yeah,
All right. So,
absolutely.
last question before I let you go. Before I let you go, Ryan.
Thank you. Before I give you permission to head out.
Yes, that's right. You may commence life once again. What would you tell a 20-year-old Ryan Michler to get here, in order to get him here sooner?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that question is actually in the question, and that is start before you're ready. Start sooner. I see too many men, including myself, who sit on ideas, right? Like, have you ever met a guy who didn't have, at least to some degree, a vision or an idea or a thought about what he wanted to do or what he wanted the future to look like? I don't know that I ever have. Right. I mean, everybody has something they want to do. And yet there's a huge gap and discrepancy between the amount of people who know what they'd like to do and who are actually doing it. Right. And what that tells me is that not we're lacking information or ideas or creativity or passion or enthusiasm or excitement. It tells me that we're lacking this one critical component in that ability to take action through, and I think this is the trait, through courage. Everybody talks about confidence, like, Ryan, how can I build more confidence with women? How can I build more confidence in my business? How can I walk into my boss's office and ask for a raise? How can I build more confidence with my body or my skills with martial arts, for example? It's almost like men and women feel like they're somehow entitled to confidence because they're breathing air and they live on this planet. You're not entitled to that. Confidence is earned. And the only way to build confidence is to take action towards a thing that you're lacking in confidence in. And that requires that other component I just talked about, which is courage. So if it were me, I would say display more courage and take action sooner and start on your ideas before you're ready to actually do them.
Right on, right on. I'd say that implementation is the one thing, if I'm ever asked, what's the secret, what's the difference between the guy that never makes it and the guy that always makes it? It's just implementation. I know too many millionaires that are fucking retards to sit here and say that you got to be a genius. You got to go to an Ivy League school. You got, even, in the martial arts world, I used to run a mastermind for martial arts school owners. Specifically, I've been a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt for 10 years, used to fight MMA. And so in the MMA Jiu-Jitsu niche, I ran a mastermind. And the biggest question I would always get is, well, how come these students don't want to sign up? I mean, I'm such a good fighter. I'm such a good competitor. And I would try to tell them, do you understand that no matter what town you're in, there's some fucking karate guy or taekwondo guy or kung fu guy that can't fight his way out of a wet paper bag that is killing it.
Yeah.
Stop thinking that you have all the answers to something that you are admitting that you cannot seem to figure out.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
And implementation is the thing that separates the men from the boys. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. All right, Ryan. So theorderofman.com is your website.
Yeah, that's the headquarters. Yep. You can find everything we're doing over there for sure.
All right. You also have the Iron Council, which I believe is your membership site component.
That is, yeah. That's our mastermind. So, and you're familiar with this. Every once in a while, not even every once in a while, there's always a small percentage of people, whether it's men, women, whoever it may be, who say, I want more. Like, I want more than the conversation. I want to do. I want action. I want accountability. I want a brotherhood. And that's what we've tried to create within the Iron Council.
Right on, right on. So great to hear from you. Great to hear your content. I got to tell you, I'm glad we had this conversation because I love the stuff you put out on Instagram. I listen to your podcast. One of the things I like about your podcast that's atypical for mine is I believe you have a couple different formats, and some of them are really short, and some of them are more interview-based. I don't shut the fuck up, so it's very hard for me to make these short little, consumable morsels of masculinity.
That's funny.
No pun intended. Phrasing, if anybody watches Archer, phrasing. But I will say that I appreciate you coming on here, and I appreciate you sharing the power that you did. So thank you for that.
You bet, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate your work. We're on similar paths, and we're doing similar things for guys across the planet. So, again, I appreciate you and the way you show up as well, brother. It's good to talk with you.